Hello and welcome back to Downforce Debrief, where of course this week the talking point is all about the Monaco Grand Prix and the two-stop mandatory race that we saw, which has certainly been divisive. And honestly, that's probably why you guys are all here. That's why we're here too. It's all going to be about that today. Now, before we get into this, I just want to say, personally, I loved it. Now, I know that sounds controversial. The reason I'm saying that, right, live sport is all about, the reason people like live sport is everyone watches the same thing at the same time, and we all talk about it. We debate. Should that have been a penalty? Should the ref have done this? What this guy did was amazing. Everyone talks about the same thing. This has created that. I love it for that. Massive talking point. That's what sport's all about. Putting that aside, yeah. Didn't really work, did it? It didn't really work. I honestly do respect them for trying because it's given us a great talking point. I'd rather that than just have a boring one-stop race where we basically had the same thing. Nothing happens, but they didn't even bother trying. At least they tried. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't think it really worked. And there's a lot to talk about here. But in general, GB, what was your thoughts on the experiment, the Monaco Grand Prix experiment? And by the way, we know George hates Monaco, so get that out of your system straight away, and then we'll move on. Go on.
Well, I think getting that out of my system will be this podcast, I think.
This is now therapy for George.
The race was an absolute shambles. Look, I've touched on it before that I understand the whole iconic vibe of Monaco. It's a special event. If I went there as a fan in person, I would have come away from that race loving it. Not because it was a good race, but because of it being Monaco. But the fact is, I'm watching it on TV as a fan, and I thought it was not just a terrible race in terms of zero racing or no overtakes. I think Stroll might have overtaken Behrman at Rascasse at one point.
Right outside,
so maybe there was like one. Was that the only overtake? Am I right in saying that?
A little bit of lap one, a bit between Antonelli and was it Bortoletto? A little bit spicy, but that's also a lap one thing. Like, yes, it was shockingly. True. I think even for Monaco, it was low on overtakes, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, but who didn't expect that, you know? And
me?
So I actually want to raise this as well. Well, you expected overtakes.
Only because of what they tried, right? Like, in theory, we could have had someone like Verstappen on very old tyres and people behind him on very new tyres, or someone trying to park the bus for 4 seconds a lap. Theoretically, if it was possible to overtake at Monaco, if there was any possible fragment of an ability to overtake at Monaco still in the current generation, we should have seen it yesterday. I think the fact we didn't, and although we were all pretty sure what overtake at Monaco was almost impossible, I think the fact they tried that and it still wasn't possible, it's now like, okay, the modern cars they no matter what we do, because don't forget we had wet races before as well, that didn't help either. No matter what we do, cars cannot overtake at Monaco now, categorically. There's nothing that can be done other than changing the cars or changing the track to make them overtake.
The thing is like, and I've got a few quotes from drivers, which I won't run through all of them in one go, but I'll pick out ones from Max, because not only was I creasing from Max's interview, because he was actually hilarious after the race. So Max summed up this race as, he said that Monaco is like playing Mario Kart and that he should start throwing banana skins. He said it doesn't matter how many pit stops you do, whether it's 2 or 10, you cannot overtake round here. And he even said at the moment, right now, an F1 car could only just about overtake an F2 car if they were both placed on track. So that gives you an idea of how bad the circuit is for racing, and how, again, as Max said, I love that we tried something different. I love that there was a clear acknowledgement that we have a problem at Monaco. We don't want to see a lap one red flag like last year and then no one else boxes for the entire race. Nice. But at this point, it's not looking good, Brev. It's not looking
Yeah, I think it is. I don't know. So we definitely accept that overtaking isn't possible. I think that's okay for me still. I still think overtaking isn't an essential part of F1. I like F1 when it's strategic and interesting, and they're racing close together and they're pushing and they're all this stuff like management and engineering and all that stuff is really interesting. For me, F1 isn't only about can cars overtake? How many overtakes did we have? Like, otherwise, we just go, how many overtakes was it? Okay, we had 90 overtakes in that race. Okay, that's an immediate 10 out of 10. It may not be. Or, oh, there's 5 overtakes. That's an immediate 1 out of 10. Again, it might not be. So I don't think overtaking is everything. For me, though, the problem with particularly that race yesterday is racing is all about creating some jeopardy. There's always some sort of like, will he be able to do it? You know, Monaco, obviously, should be about, can you go quickly while threading it between the walls and not binning it? That's what we get in quality because they actually have to push. And that was the problem with the race, is that most of the drivers, in fact, Norris said after the race, the only lap he pushed for the entire race was the last lap, which sucks. Like, there was no jeopardy. No one crashed, really. Fortunato obviously kind of put into the wall, and we had Gasly having a crash because people were going slowly. Other than that, there was no mistakes. There was nothing happened because they were all cruising so much.
I agree. I completely agree with that. And you hit the nail on the head right there of why you can't really have strategy, because the only strategy is holding up other cars or how do we avoid this car? Like, there's no... I agree with what you say. I don't watch every race and I'm like, I want to see 100 overtakes today, otherwise the race is terrible. But if you go to a circuit where overtaking is literally almost impossible, then how can strategy even benefit that? Because then even if you manage to get some sort of undercut or something, fine. But then there's nothing else to it. There's no, you know, you've then got a wider issue which we'll touch on of cars holding each other up. And when there is no possible outcome on track and it has to go into the pit stops, I just don't think that's beneficial for anyone. I don't think, I mean, you heard like Williams in particular, we know they were playing the games. Like James Vowles was like apologetic and saying live at the time towards the end of the race that it's not what he wanted to see. And
apparently he texted Toto Wolff as well and literally apologized during the race, which is a bit mad. Yeah.
Wow. There you go. Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy.
But again, though, what I will say is I was glued to the TV. I don't know about you, because it was, I don't want to do it again. But it was a fantastic experiment to be like, right, like, what are these guys going to do? The teams were saying before the race, like, we thought this was going to be a simple strategy. Actually, the more we've dug into it, the more we're like, we actually don't know what the hell to do. Clearly, we now know the optimal strategy is more or less, no matter how far apart your teammates are, get the second one to back up massively so the other one can get the pit stops out of the way, because you can drop 4 or 5 seconds a lap and not get overtaken incredibly, unless you're illegally overtake. We'll get to that. But So it was interesting because we had some people boxing lap 1. That didn't work. That was a strategy I thought could work. We had some people like Max going all in for a late red flag. If we had a red flag 5 laps from the end, Max Verstappen would have won the race, probably, barring a terrible start off the red flag resumption. So like it was interesting seeing all the teams puzzle over this weird problem that they're presented with, that not only have you got managed 2 stops, but it also... You know, to say track position is king is a massive understatement, in that that's all that mattered. That is all that mattered. Pace didn't matter. Tyre wear didn't matter. Strategy didn't matter. All that matters is you were ahead. So we saw the people boxing lap 1. They got caught in these horrible trains that people were purposely causing, and it completely killed it. But it was interesting. Were you guys, George, were you gripped to the TV a little bit? Were you, because it wasn't a snooze fest of like, I know nothing's going to happen here. It was like, oh, but how is this actually going to come out? I think is this weird Williams strategy going to work?
This is the point I'm trying to make, is that I wasn't disinterested, but I was more, I don't know what the word is, maybe disillusioned. I was gripped for the wrong reasons. There were parts where, watching with my girlfriend Carla, me and Carla literally laughed at several parts of the race. The Russell drive-through thing, we were literally laughing. Look, I get your point. If we're talking content as a content creator, fine. It gave us content. It gave us talking points, fine. But as I've said many times, different viewers will watch for different reasons. I'm a viewer that watches for the racing. I want to watch a good race. Simple as that. And it was not a good race. So yes, I was... I would probably say gripped to the screen is the wrong word, because we knew there would be no overtakes, so we were just waiting on pit stops and something to happen there. But I was definitely not, falling asleep or tuning out. Fine, but like I said, for the wrong reasons. Like I don't want to see gimmicky strategies that because of the lack of overtaking and gimmicky illegal overtakes and things like that. You know, that's racing for me. That's racing for the wrong reasons.
I do agree. I do think I prioritize strategy, as in I enjoy strategy more than the average person. So I quite enjoyed it for that size. But I do agree. Yeah. I mean, I think we need to talk about as well the intentionally backing up thing in a bit more detail, because that was wild. I mean, it's, you know, there was I've seen people talking about that anyone who did that should be disqualified. Both Williams should be disqualified, and the VCARB should be disqualified. All this other stuff, and you know, realistically, you can't mandate someone has to go a certain speed. So, you know, whatever, it is legal. But it is, you know, the fact that James Bowles came out and apologised for what his team was doing during the race is insane. Because it's not sportsmanlike, is it? F1 racing is supposed to be about going as quickly as you can. But there was no rules against it. In reality, F1 in particular is about getting away with everything you can within the confines of the rules. It's how they build their cars. It just is what it is. It was a situation that was created by the strange rule that wasn't really foreseen that much. And it obviously isn't great. And I definitely don't think we should repeat it. But it was interesting that was the best strategy, which I don't think we've ever seen it to that extent before. Because that was what literally Williams, VCARB did it. So then Williams basically had to do it. So then Mercedes ended up doing it with Antonelli to make sure George Russell got P11. But the only part I didn't understand about this is I don't really understand the people that were being backed up. Why did they just let themselves get backed up? It was driving me insane. And I was watching the race with Team Up Monaco, actually, Ben Daly. It was driving us both insane that Mercedes weren't pitting out of that. Why allow the cars in front of you to cost you 4 seconds a lap, especially if you haven't done any of your mandatory 2 stops? Box, lose 5 positions, sure, but then at least you're then within genuinely about 5 laps. You're then back on the back of that pack, and at least the guy that's doing the holding up, at least once he's done with that, he will then drop behind you, as will anyone else in front of you that still hasn't done the amount of stops that you've done. That, to me, was a no-brainer in that situation. Even though track limit is king, if someone's doing that and you cannot get past them, you have to just try something else. The fact that Mercedes did nothing with either car for about 60 laps was insane. But what do you think about this intentional backing up?
The Mercedes, I mean, where were the Mercedes strategy? Did they literally was it just the drivers just chilling and that was it? It was crazy. It was all over social media. Mercedes were the only team to just basically not have a strategy team that race. They just did not even bother doing anything until the end, when they were like, all right, sorry, we're bending the rules now that we've been shafted. So it's like, well, why would you at least not, even at the start of the race, try and like get one of your pit stops out of the way early with one of your drivers, or, maybe use Antonelli because he's the one behind, or I don't know, like just try something. The fact that they started both cars on hards and then just did nothing, as you said, and just allowed themselves to be sat behind was also borderline laughable. I think that was another thing we were laughing at during the race. I actually forgot. I really wanted to try and add up the points that I laughed at during the race. That's something I don't do. I don't normally turn up to an F1 race, watch it, and laugh. Unless there's really something comical. But it was crazy. It was crazy. And so I don't know what I just don't know why, as you said, the second because it was the VCARBs, I think, that started. I think James Vowles said we responded to it because of Alpine. I don't remember that. I remember VCARB because I think he must
have been VCARB, surely.
Yeah, maybe. It was Lawson massively backing up for Hadjar, obviously, or Hadjar, as we like to call him. So
we love to call
so obviously they kind of started it, and then Williams obviously were like, all right, well, if you're getting points out of this, we'll get some points as well. And then, why would they not do anything? I really was baffled by it. Didn't make any sense. So just a bit of a head scratching race, I think, for strategy teams and fans alike. And obviously I've got a couple quotes from not a direct quote from Albon, but Albon at the end in his interviews apologized for the viewers for Williams' strategy. Firstly, when have we ever heard that? Literally directly looked into the camera and apologized.
That is mad.
Carlos Sainz, direct quotes, says, "It shows that the 2 stops haven't changed anything. I'm incredibly disappointed with this race and this sport in general. People have manipulated the race. The results have been manipulated." That
manipulated,
is
man.
Extreme. That's 2021 vibes. That was the last time we heard that. So complete and utter shambles.
Yeah, I think that it is the right word for it. I think so. First of all, let's talk about the penalty that George Russell got, because that was interesting. Obviously, being massively backed up by the Williams, I do think he unintentionally went off track because he almost did what Gasly did, almost smashed into the back of the Williams, went through the runoff area, and then at that point, I think he just thought, do you know what, sod it, let's just go. So it was intentional in that he chose not to give it back. I actually don't think the actual overtake was necessarily intentional. But first of all, I was worried we'd only get a 5-10 second penalty for that, and he genuinely would do a purposeful illegal overtake and only get a minor penalty. I was glad to see him get a harsher penalty, and actually it was a very smart penalty by the stewards because they gave him a drive-through, which is not only is a 20-second penalty, effectively, it also has to be taken within 3 laps. So that was actually a really smart decision by the stewards. They also made that decision fairly quickly, because obviously the longer they left it, the more he would be able to pull away from the Williams. So actually, I think that was the right decision. It was a harsher penalty because it was purposeful. He also stupidly admitted it was purposeful. He should have just played dumb on the radio. You know, he may have got a less penalty. The fact he then still came out in front of Williams is mainly, honestly, a bottle from Williams' point of view. They should have, at that point, for just 3 laps is all it would have taken, pause the backing up to make sure that when George Russell does take his penalty, he comes out behind you again. Why the hell they continued the bus parking when they knew that just 3 laps later, if they kept doing what they're doing, George Russell would be ahead of them and allowed him to gain that position was very strange to me. But fine, whatever, they did. But it is the fact that someone even considered, because we're talking about purposeful backing up being unsportsmanlike, breaking the rules on purpose, even though it's to undo the other unsportsmanlike behaviour, in my opinion, is worse. Because although what Williams and the V-Cup did wasn't illegal, it was a bit dodgy, but it wasn't illegal. What George Russell was black and white against the rules. So that was a bit dodgy. I do respect them for going for it, to be honest, with what we were seeing. But it created another really spicy moment, so I'm not too upset with it. But I do think a drive-through was right. Williams just shot the ball to allow him to go a little bit. But in the end, he still only got P11. So even a purposeful illegal overtake didn't do anything. What do you think about this George Russell stuff?
You know what? I'm glad you said this because I actually voted as my driver of the day. Just literally for the games. Like, I loved it. It was great. He basically just stuck a middle finger up at the whole situation and was like, right, I'm going to cut the track. He tried to disguise it very terribly. Antonelli, I think. Antonelli's looked like he genuinely did nearly hit the back of, I think it was Albon.
You think he always had planned it? You think George Russell never planned to make that corner before he even got there?
When you watch his onboard, it's not. Sorry. As in, he plans to make the corner.
I think he didn't intend to cut the corner when he hit the brakes, but because of the bus parking, he basically made a mistake, almost hit them, went off track, similar to what we saw a couple other cars do. And then at that point, once he got the illegal overtake done, he was like, do you know what? I'm just going to keep going on it. I don't think he went into the corner before he hit the brakes with the intention of doing what he did, but you think he did?
I think. Oh no! So sorry. He intended to cut the corner and overtake, but I thought he disguised it poorly. That's what I meant. So I don't think he did intend to make the corner. I think he was always going to cut and do that. But I guess we'll never know. When I saw his onboard, he just didn't. It looked too of an obvious mistake. But then again, Albon was braking very early, which obviously Antonelli had that problem. So, I don't know. But ultimately, as you said, he carried on going straight on. He was like, I'll take the penalty, don't care. And we were thinking at home, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Yeah, it's probably going to be like a 10-second drive-through, straight up, drive-through. I was like, oh my God, Russell's been mudded by that. And then within about, it was like 5 or 6 laps. It was not long at all. Russell had already done his drive-through, and bro had still come out ahead of Albon. We were cracking up at that. It was.
Did you think the penalty was fair though? Do you think drive-through was the right decision by the stewards?
I don't know if it was the right decision, but I do like that they didn't apply the standard ruling. I liked that they used a bit of common sense to be like, right, this is clearly intentional. This is a scenario where you can't overtake, blah, 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 blah. they applied a bit of common sense to a normal ruling where clearly a 5 or 10 second, it wouldn't have been right, would it? Clearly, you'd gain so much more from that. So I don't know if a drive-through was the correct decision. Maybe, would you go harsher? Maybe even a stop and go? I don't know if that was way too harsh, but I mean, yeah, it's an interesting one. I like that they did apply common sense. It was nice to see that they realized that would have been too lenient, a 5 or 10 second.
I think with hindsight, a stop-go would have been a better decision purely because it would have put him back in where he should have been, realistically. It would have undone his illegal activity. But again, I actually think it was the right decision by the stewards. I think it was Williams that dropped the ball by continuing to park the bus and not just chasing him down and making sure you stay within 20 seconds of him. That was a bit of a bottle. I mean, less than 20 seconds, I think. But yeah, it's a bit of a bottle, really, by Williams. But yeah, anyway, it is what it is. Another interesting thing to me to note was that none of the crazy strategies worked. None of them. There was nobody that did something mental that stopped on like lap 1, maybe stopped on lap 1 and lap 2, or like Max did, going all in for a late safety car. Obviously, we didn't get that, so that didn't help anybody. But nobody who did anything crazy other than this back in the field up thing worked, which is kind of a shame. It'd been great to see someone that started right at the back that's just gone for a stupid strategy, and somehow, we've got Bortoletto leading the Monaco Grand Prix, and he's got 20 laps to defend from Max Verstappen and Lando Norris. You know what I mean? That sounds amazing. Unfortunately, we didn't get that.
It's a big problem, isn't it? It's a big problem that yes, I agree. It would have been nice to see someone do that, but then you look, you look at could Max try and do something different? He was P4. We know that probably Max wouldn't mind dropping down to P5 if it's risking the win, for example. So could we see like a bit of a switch up with strategy? But you can't do anything. Your hands are completely tied because as soon as you get behind the car, regardless of the tire offset, you are stuck behind. And I do actually have a lot of respect for Red Bull. I really like the way they approached this with Max. They, on both of Max's stops, they basically just said, well, we don't care about P4 or lower. We want to try and get a huge slice of luck and get Max in the lead on worse tyres, on one less pit stop, and just hope there's a VSC or a safety car or something that can try and help him get P1. They did roll the dice with Max, even though they could, if that makes sense. Like that sounds like an obvious choice because, well, he's not going to gain and he's still going to slot out in P4 anyway when he does box. But I like it. Red Bull are always smart when it comes to strategy. I cannot remember the last time they really dropped the ball on tyre strategy, outside of a pit stop. So yeah, a lot of respect for Red Bull for that race. They approached it as well as they could for Max. They didn't get any luck when they kept him out, and that's all you can do. Is though, it was just, not much more to say on that really.
I agree. So let's move on. So that was the 2-stop ruling that they tried, which clearly didn't work. I don't think there's anyone with a sane mind that's calling for that to come back. I'm glad they tried it. I much more enjoyed that race than I enjoyed if they didn't do that and we'd had a processional 1 stop, nothing happening. So happy days, but it didn't work. So what else can we do? I think, first of all, we have to say, look, if they were going to change the track, surely they'd have changed the track by now. It's not news to anybody that you can't overtake at Monaco, and it has gotten worse over the years. Let's just say they can't change track layout, because that's an easy out. Go, well, just add a corner, add a, whatever. It's an easy out. Let's assume that is impossible, because surely they've done it. Also, the cars. Obviously, in the ideal world, we'll just make the cars 100 kilos lighter, make them be able to follow a bit closer. Again, very obvious solution. They're working on it. Like, they will do that if they can, of course. So again, let's rule that out. You cannot change the cars. You cannot change the track. All right. So what else do you do? The 2-stop didn't work. I think for me, the only thing that could work would be something which did basically the opposite to what the 2-stop did, and that is forcing the drivers to push in some way. So don't allow them to park the bus, because we know you can't overtake anyway. So absolutely fine. You can't overtake, but don't allow them to use that strategy where they can park the bus. So make them push, because then you're more likely to get people in the wall or people taking risks. And then it's interesting because people are pushing and they're tapping the wall here and there. And it's exciting to watch, because quali is exciting to watch at Monaco. It is exciting to watch because they have to push so hard. So somehow you've got to come up with some sort of system that makes the drivers push. What that is very difficult. Honestly, I don't really have any answers, because, if I did, then I'd probably be employed by F1. I think the first thing to do is dish out some points in quali. I think Monaco is clearly the most important qualifying session of the year. It's basically just about quali, so dish out some points in quali. Just do it. It's different. Beyond there, I mean, I thought about maybe like a reverse grid. I just think that's a bit too cheesy. And honestly, you end up with the same situation anyway, realistically. Just because you put Max Verstappen on the back doesn't mean he's going to make his way up to third place and get a load of overtakes. Realistically, you do get a couple more overtakes, I would guess, but not that many more. It ends up being similar. So reverse grid, I don't think really works. Do something like maybe have a fastest lap competition. Maybe whoever's got in the race, the top 10 people with the fastest lap gets 10 points, the second one gets 9 points. I'm just sort of thinking out loud here, honestly. I thought about potentially even then multiplying that by your finishing position to stop people just everyone pits at the end, everyone just it's a quali session in the last 10 minutes of the race. I don't know. That's just a few ideas for you. I don't think any of them work in themselves. As I said, the only thing I know is that you have to get the drivers to push in the race. I even thought about doing put them in a spec car, put more in F2 cars or something for the race. Do you know what I mean? But obviously it's F1. It's the F1 World Championship. You can't have them in different cars. They have to be in their own cars. I don't know. Have you got any thoughts on this, George? Have you got any ideas? Do you agree at least that everyone should be pushing, and that might, whatever idea you come up with, that has to aim to have that goal, that drivers have to push in the race? You can't have people driving purposefully 4 seconds up off the race. Do you think that is at least what we should be aiming for?
I do, but I'm at a point where I'm like, we're running out of options, and outside of drastically changing the circuit layout, if my solution is whoever's best mates for Prince Albert and can get some planning permissions for the Monaco Harbour, they need to cook, they need to extend the track, they need to make it wider, and then we can have a race. Aside from that, you mentioned points in quali. I think that would do the opposite. I think that then just means whoever gets pole gets load of points, happy days, and then gets a free win in the race as well. That just an unfair advantage in the championship. So I just want to be clear on that.
I do think you'd have to reduce the points in the race. Overall, the weekend, you'd have the same amount of points available to the best driver. Otherwise, it's an OP weekend, which would be silly.
Okay, fine. But then that still has the same end result. I always come back to the racing, the magical word, racing. If I can't see good racing and at least a possibility of overtaking, for me, it's not worth watching. It's as blunt as that. So, regardless of what they do with points, regardless of what they do with reverse grid, because I think if you start max P20, barring a miracle with safety car luck or something, he finishes P20, apart from DNFs or whatever, no one can overtake. So reverse grid wouldn't do anything. So for me, it is purely, all I can think of is track layout, is if we can find a way of altering the circuit slightly, but then, we know the location. It's going to be so damn hard to do that. So I really don't know. I come back to it, and I've said this before. This is why I think Monaco should be dropped. I think maybe we can talk about, for the short term, alternating. Potentially we say, okay, Monaco, you disappointed us this year. A lot of fans are annoyed. No Monaco next year. We'll bring it back in 27. Maybe we can do something like that. And then in place of Monaco, you have a Hockenheim or a track that we know can provide some good racing.
I see your suggestion to get rid of the Monaco Grand Prix, and I raise you Joker laps. What are your thoughts on Joker laps? Having some sort of, most GP has the long lap where you have to go a long way around a corner. It's a long cut, effectively. It costs you 2 or 3 seconds. Obviously, very difficult to do that sort of thing on Monaco, but maybe there's a certain area where you could add in a roundabout or something, maybe just before the tunnel. I know there's a roundabout thing there. Maybe you could have it so that a driver has to almost do an extra hairpin that costs you maybe 2 seconds. I'll give my thoughts in a minute on dropping the Monaco Grand Prix, because I do think I've had some new thoughts on that. But let's just say that for whatever reason, because F1's F1, there's a load of money in Monaco, there's a certain reason, whatever, they're not going to drop Monaco. So if Monaco is on the calendar next year, even though that would be not your personal choice, what would you do? What would you do? That's really... I would have been really annoyed.
If it is on the calendar?
Yeah.
So, I'm going to be really annoyed. It's a really good question. I genuinely don't have an answer. I don't know. I don't think Monaco can be improved unless we talk about changing the size of the cars. But for me, that's the wrong reason because, well, what about all the other tracks we have great racing on? The cars are big there, so why should they specially be adapted for one circuit? You know, I don't care that we're talking about Monaco. It's one circuit on a 23 race calendar. Why are we adapting the cars for that? So look, if they change the size of the cars, fine. Then we have a conversation if overtaking is possible. But otherwise, I just can't think of a way to make it better, unless, like I said, changing the layout. But I don't know. I've heard rumors of that in recent years, but I would imagine it's surely incredibly difficult to do something like that. And you alluded to a Joker lap, which is fundamentally changing the layout of the circuit, which is maybe something I could warm to. I don't know how a Joker lap would work. Obviously, that's more a MotoGP thing, right? So I'm not really fully aware of that. It sounds gimmicky for me, but I don't know how you could implement that without it being gimmicky. So yeah, that's my answer is plain and simple. I don't know. I don't think it can be saved at the moment, barring a massive direction change with the cars. So that's why I think it should be dropped.
Yeah, and I do think, I mean, look, you've been calling for Monaco to be dropped for years. It's the least surprising thing in the world. They'll say, hey, why don't we get rid of Monaco, guys? Oh, good idea, GB.
At least I'm consistent.
You are consistent, yeah. I'm not. I'm all over the shop, my opinions. You love to see it. I got to be honest. I've always not been calling for Monaco to be dropped. I think, you know, we've covered this before, but I think it's got a great history. I think it's a unique challenge. I think F1 is better with more variable circuits. I disagree with what you're saying. Oh, yeah, but, you know, the cars aren't the problem because F1 is better with a variety of circuits. If every circuit is a lot like Silverstone, but the corners turn in different directions, that's really boring. Yeah. So I like the variety that Monaco brings. I like that it's more about qualifying. I like that the wall's so close. I like that, you know, it's a glitz and glamour race. I like the history. I do like all that. So I've never really been calling for Monaco to be dropped. But I do think, weirdly, with them trying this two-stop this weekend, has sort of exposed it to, like, if even that can't fix it, maybe it really is time to get rid of Monaco. Maybe. Because, like I said, they created all the situations to have people driving 4 seconds off the pace. If you need to be 10 seconds up quicker to somebody to overtake, it's not really the fact that you're not getting overtakes. It's more that it then opens up the unsportsmanlike strategies that we saw. That is clearly possible at Monaco now, which sucks. Like, that does suck. So yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I'm not necessarily calling right away for it to be off the calendar immediately. I would like to see them try something else next year. I suspect next year they might go, didn't work, we'll just go back to how it was, which would be rubbish. I would like to see them try, something like a Joker lap. Like I said, maybe I've been to Monaco. The only place I can think of that might be relatively easy to do something like a Joker lap maybe would be the entrance to the tunnel. You could make the default track where just so where you come out the hairpin, then there's a double right. You maybe do a right and then a brief left that just literally goes round a roundabout. So it's just slightly extending the circuit there. But then you have a Joker lap that does the original layout basically. And maybe you say twice in the race you can use it. It is gimmicky, though. It's the problem, isn't it? It moves away from what F1 fundamentally is. I don't know. I would like to see them try something else. But honestly, I am closer than ever to just straight up saying we need to drop Monaco. I'm not quite there yet.
Oh, but I'm getting you there. I'm getting you there.
You are. You're wearing me down bit by bit.
Yeah, look, it doesn't sound terrible, that Joker lap idea. But ultimately, if you're gaining positions by that, it's still not overtaking, is it? I understand that we can have a good race with limited overtakes with good strategy, but it's still I'm not sure that sits right. I think one thing I did think of, which I don't know what your thoughts are, maybe if they could somehow implement the kind of 107% rule they have in qualifying, if they could try and do something like that, implement it in the race where there is a certain delta that the cars would have to stick to. Obviously, that's going to be quite hard to implement in a race, given the amount of different variables in play. But maybe something like that could work. But then I look in the details and I'm like, well, You still can't overtake. Maybe that does something to the two-stop mandatory strat, because maybe that then varies what teams might do. Okay, we don't like the intentional backing up, so it probably would fix that. But would it fix the race? I don't think so. I just, that's what I mean. I can suggest something like that, but it would be purely as the two-stop was introduced, where I'm like, okay, I think Monaco's dropped. Love the track. Think the race is rubbish, but I'm willing to try this new concept.
I actually think that's a good idea. It would fix like you said, the problem with two-stop. It would fix the backing up thing. My only concern with that is it's a sticking plaster. It's not a solution. It's like
100%.
resolving this one problem that we created by trying to fix a different problem. It's not really fixing the core problem. Which, yeah, I suppose wildcard, Joker laps kind of are as well, to be fair. So I like it though. Honestly, I think with hindsight, I do wish they had that. Have it'd have to be less than maybe 103% rule or something. So you can never be more than 3% slower than the fastest guy on track on any given lap. And if you do it more than 4 or 5 times, then you get a penalty or whatever, which would basically force them to pit. As soon as let's say someone just pitted for new tyres and suddenly they've gained a second a lap while you're on really old tyres, and suddenly you've just started drifting out of that 103% zone, you then have to pit for new tyres. It would kind of force you to pit a bit more maybe as well. I do think, actually, of all the solutions we've suggested today, I think you might have just cooked there maybe accidentally. I think it'd be really hard to get the level right though, because like, for example, in qualifying you say, right, it's 107%, which in Monaco, I don't know, it'd be something like, what would it be, like 5 seconds a lap? That's a complete guess, something like that. So in Monaco, 5 seconds a lap, but then what if Cadillac come in next year and they're 4 seconds a lap off the pace? They've had a shocker, right? They built a donkey of a car. They're just about scraping in 107, but then in the race you go, well, 107 is too much. We don't want people driving 4 seconds off the pace. So let's make it 103%, and then that's 2 seconds a lap, let's say. But then you just making a team literally not being able to legally finish the race. No, it works for this season because the car's so close. And I do think it's one of the best solutions. But again, it's not a sticking plaster, isn't it?
I think, though, that in that scenario, and again, there's so many variables in play, but maybe in that, like using Cadillac as an example, that the FIA would have like some sort of concrete simulation data of saying, this is our pace, this is where we're at, and then potentially then the percentage threshold is set on your car's pace rather than, we wouldn't see this as viewers. We wouldn't be able to see, Mercedes is going around 2 seconds off their blah 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 pace. But what it would mean is that if we had that Albon situation, the stewards immediately investigate it. They have the delta, they have the data. There's no lying; it's just pure facts, and they say, right, you are way off your pace. We're giving you X kind of punishment, or they maybe punish the team because it obviously benefits another driver. So, but what I was going to say, Alex, is that, like this whole thing that we're doing, all these tweets that we're reading, it's like, that's the problem. We're all trying our hardest to think of a compromise that will make Monaco work. And it's because we love the track. I do love the track. Like,
I don't believe you.
It's an iconic race. I love driving it in the F1 game. It's a fun, enjoyable track, but I don't like watching races there. And, I've tried Porsche Super Cup. I watched the F2, which, by the way, lap 1 was absolute chaos, like 10-car pileup. Like, I've watched a lot of stuff there, and it's always the same outcome. And that's why I have that opinion, is not because I hate Monaco. It's because we're all sat here scratching our heads trying to think of some sort of godlike, gimmicky solution that will fix it. And it's just like, we go to any other track. Okay, let's look at Miami before this year. How many of us, including me and you, were like, Miami sucks, get it gone, racing's terrible. But as soon as it's Monaco, it's like, oh yeah, but it's Monaco. Well, we got to keep it because it's Monaco. It's like, I get it, but Monaco is the only track on the calendar with this privilege. Any other track would probably be gone by now because we'd be like, yeah, get it gone. This is terrible.
One final thought on this before we move on, because it's been 38 minutes talking about basically the same thing. Is that what does best for us content-wise? 100% distance race, Monaco Grand Prix. Boom. More views than any other track. Clearly the interest is there. So, like, Monaco fundamentally is an interesting concept. Think of some of the best pole laps. Well, the often one that's often said is Jeddah, Max Verstappen. What's that got in common? Walls are super close. I go back to Vettel's 2011 pole lap, where the blown diffuser era, where he just had so much grip and it was just mad watching him. Insane. Senna, qualifying lap, amazing. These were qualifying laps, but it is a fundamentally interesting concept, I think. I think you're right. The track is still interesting. But yeah, we've obviously got this big issue of you can't overtake, and we've thought about it. We've put our brains together. We don't have a solution. Let's just begin at the bin. GB's happy. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I do hope F1 keeps trying. I do hope they don't just keep renewing it every year. And next year they just go, oh, people didn't like that, so won't do anything. That's even worse. I genuinely, I don't want to see two mandatory pit stops retained. But I'm really glad I did it. It's a massive talking point. It's what sports are all about. It's what I said at the top of the episode. I overall enjoyed it because it was interesting. I was gripped to the TV in a weird way. It's allowed us to talk about it. It's allowed you guys to listen to it. I'm sure that this episode's going to do better because of it. Great. But anyway, draw a line under that for now. Not for now. Permanently. I'm done. I just want to talk about the penalties a little bit at the Monaco Grand Prix, because we've covered off the George Russell penalty. But I thought there were some weird penalties other than that. So we had Lance Stroll in practice literally cut directly in front of Charles Leclerc, crash into him on purpose. If that was on the road, it would have been 100% Stroll, so let alone on a racetrack. Give Leclerc damage his own car, 1 place grid drop. Like, I know it's Monaco, etc., 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 but it doesn't change the fact that he literally just cut him off aggressively, gave both cars damage, 1 place grid drop. You then got, on the opposite side of this, Ollie Behrman, who was given a 10-place grid drop for accidentally overtaking someone under red flag. And you may not have seen this, but what I mean by accidentally is there was a red flag thrown right in the middle of a corner for him, and it's Monaco. He won't have noticed it while he was trying to keep a car at the wall through a corner. Then on the exit, he realised the red flag was there. And then about 1 second later, and I'm not exaggerating, he'd overtaken a car. So basically what the stewards were saying is you should have absolutely jammed on the brakes and, locked up maybe. Like, that's less safe than what he did. It's not like everyone knew it was a red flag and he's purposely overtaken him. No, it was a case of it happened within about a second of the red flag coming out. He's accidentally overtaken someone who, by the way, was completely off the line. He was cruising because he was intending to let Behrman through, so he was going really slowly. It was genuinely safer in that situation for him to overtake. And yet they've given him a 10-place grid drop for overtaking under the red flag conditions. I think that's absolutely insane. And it's even more insane when you consider that someone who's not going to say purposely caused a collision, but did swipe across somebody accidentally, but did cause an actual collision and is only given 1 place. I think those two things combined are insane. What do you think about that, George?
I actually disagree. I think they make complete sense, and I'm not. I've been a harsh critic of the stewards for a while on numerous incidents. I think I will admit that I have not seen the onboard of Behrman.
You can't mean this. I'm still waiting for that. Oh, just kidding. You can't mean this. This must be bait.
The reason being that, so I haven't seen the onboard footage. If he really was, if it was just red flags, like the moment he's alongside or whatever, then that's clearly harsh. But I did read the FIA's wording, which was along the lines of that there was a board that illuminated red in Behrman's vision before he went past the car. That's all I know. So if that is the case, that he was able to consciously not make that overtake, then it's the right decision, because regardless of the circumstance, and forget about Stroll for a moment, regardless of the circumstances with red flags, there's a severe issue if there's been a red flag, clearly. Like there's something that's gone badly wrong. So there is a big safety hazard to all drivers and all personnel involved, including marshals. So there cannot be any risk taken whatsoever. As soon as the red flags come out, you do not overtake, you slow your car down, you crawl it into the pits. It's for me, it's as simple as that. For me, that is what we would call a slam dunk penalty if he is actually deemed to have done that, which again, I haven't seen the onboard, so I don't know how harsh that is. What I will say with Stroll is that I heard the comms with his engineer at the time. I think when he came around Mirabeau, his engineer was saying like 5.5 to Leclerc or something. I think it was at that point. And So I don't know whether it was the engineer's calls to Stroll or Stroll's like lack of awareness at that point that caused the collision. It definitely wasn't intentional. Stroll was complaining afterwards that like, oh, I didn't realize he was that close, basically.
You're right. There is some mitigating circumstance there. It was Monaco. Clearly, it wasn't on purpose. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. I think in these sort of situations, it's the engineer's responsibility to tell the driver. It's the driver's responsibility to be able to process that information and deal with it. Like, honestly, when these things happen, it's just a thing that happens sometimes. It's a team thing. It wasn't purposeful, but fundamentally, he caused a collision. That is dangerous because a bit of Charles Leclerc's front wing could have flown up and hit a Marshall in the face. Like that, racing is fundamentally a dangerous thing to do. So you want to obviously avoid collisions wherever you can. So that was dangerous, but it wasn't. I do agree fundamentally with you on the red flag stuff. Of course, you need to be going slow. You need to be making sure you're not overtaken. Of course, yes, you're right. There's been a severe issue, but what Behrman did was less dangerous than what Stroll did. Now, the other thing I'll add to this is UK traffic lights. Because basically what you've just said there is you shouldn't have an amber light in the UK. It should go green, red. And if you go through red, here's a fine. That would obviously be insane. There has to be some leeway for reaction time.
No, but UK red lights come out to allow traffic to flow. They don't come out because there's been a serious collision and a safety hazard for everyone. And, it's not comparable. But
my point is, it would be the same thing. It would be the same thing. Let's say, because there was, again, I feel like you need to see the onboard, because there was a big speed difference between the cars. Let's say a car is doing 200 kilometers an hour, and a car is letting him go, so he's doing 50 kilometers an hour, right? Massive speed difference, no problem. It happens all the time racing. The slow car will be off the line, no worries. There's then a red flag. Somewhere else on the track, they can't know what's going to happen. Boom, red flag. There's a board right in front of your face. So the second it gets called, you know the red flag's happening. But you're less than a second away from this car that's going really slowly. You cannot stop the car in that time. Physically, you cannot do it. That should obviously not be a penalty. So it's not, I don't think it's as clear cut as you kind of made out there. There has to be some leeway for reaction time, realistic stopping time. But more than that, and this is the key thing for me, is safety. It was safer for Behrman to overtake in that situation because there was an extreme speed difference and he did see it super late. And it genuinely, because you're right, there was basically a board right next to the car he was overtaking. So like he did see it before he overtook him, but that was genuinely within about a second of him overtaking him. So there just wasn't time. The alternative would be to jam on the brakes, potentially lock up, potentially cause a second crash on track. It was so far away, it made sense to overtake in that situation. I thought it was insane.
I think for me, the grey area with me is obviously how harsh was the penalty given the circumstances, which ultimately I don't know. So I'll take your word on that being extremely harsh. I think in terms of the difference of penalties, though, regardless of the Behrman situation, for me, it makes a lot of sense. We've got a collision in practice that was not intentional, and you can see that from the comms. One place grid penalty, maybe that's too lenient. There's an argument there, sure. But by the book, overtaking under red flags absolutely should be a way harsher penalty than a unintentional collision in a practice session. 100% should be, but like by the book. And I know that there needs to be a bit of common sense applied. We touched on it earlier with the drive-through penalty for Russell. It's nice to see that. Maybe they could have done the same in this scenario, but maybe the FIA are just thinking it's red flags. So we don't want any drivers thinking that, they can squeeze in a little bit of extra, like a little overtake here or a little bit of extra time here when red flags or whatever. They don't want drivers taking that and running. Maybe that's their way of doing it. I don't know. Whether it's harsh is another question, but I think absolutely those penalties, the red flags being more severe, was the right decision.
I do agree on the face of it. I just think in this situation, a bit more common sense should have been applied. But one final point on this. So you think Stroll's penalty was about right, maybe a little bit lenient. What did you think about Hamilton's penalty for impeding Verstappen, but ultimately no collision was made? Similar sort of situation, miscommunication between team and driver, and he's accidentally impeded. Obviously, Hamilton's was in qualifying, Stroll's was in practice, that's the key difference, but no collision, key in Verstappen's one, and fundamentally didn't actually affect Verstappen's qualifying in the end. So what are your thoughts on that by comparison?
Completely agree, because he did impede, and his team messed up. It wasn't Hamilton's fault. His team literally said, car behind slowing down, so he drove normally when Verstappen was going into Casino. So it was the right decision. He clearly did impede Verstappen regardless of the outcome, because that's not how we do it. what annoyed me a lot is that Verstappen in Miami had 2 incidents where he impeded cars himself, no penalties whatsoever. So this is not Verstappen's fault. Please give us the same set of stewards every weekend and we will stop having these situations. For me, this is a perfect example of, I agree with the Hamilton penalty at Monaco. That was impeding. I completely disagreed at Miami. Verstappen should have had grid penalties. So please, just if cars are impeding each other in quali, give them penalties, and they will take it seriously. If people are punished harshly for this, like the red flags, they will take it seriously. It's. I agreed with the Monaco one anyway. I take it you disagreed based on how.
I just more that by the fact that Stroll only got a 1 place for literally causing a collision and physically damaging a rival's car. A 1 place for that, maybe mitigating circumstances of Monaco. Okay, accepted. I don't understand why Hamilton's was harsher than that, having made basically the same mistake, but ultimately didn't cause a collision. I know it's in a more important session. I think I honestly, I saw it and I thought that's obviously a penalty. Based on Stroll's, it'll be a 1 place grid drop. The fact it was 3, I thought was insane. I thought they should have been the same, because although Stroll's doing equality, that causing a collision is also worse. So in the end, they end up about the same. I don't really understand why Stroll's was penalised less when he literally damaged a rival's car, especially in the cost cap era. That's big. So I don't know. So you think it's fair? You think both those penalties were right?
Genuinely, from 3 penalties, 10 place for red flag, 3 place for impeding quali, 1 place for crash in practice, because that's what it was. It was just a crash in practice, regardless of the severity. If it was intentional, we got a different, they can obviously tell the intentions behind it with the footage and data. So, it was absolutely, like I said, there's an argument to say, to argue the harshness on maybe a couple of them, but yeah, 100%. I think in practice, a crash in practice, again, let's strip it back to that, because we've seen many crashes in practice in the past. I don't think you should be getting any more than a 1 place grid penalty for a crash in practice, unless it is, unless like someone's just straight line the corner and taken someone out, in which case you can get disqualified and get the bin. But I don't see how, I don't really understand how we can look at the other view, because one's impeding in a qualifying session, which does affect the session, regardless of the fact that it didn't affect Verstappen in the end. It did affect him at the time. He was on a push lap. And you've got 1 practice session versus Leclerc. Yes, they've got to fix the car. That does impact them. But otherwise, there's no other further impact, as performance doesn't matter. And the red flag thing is all about safety and being a serious hazard and not having any overtaking and, calm going back into the pit. So for me, I don't know whether that's controversial, because I actually haven't seen social media takes on this. So I'd love to know viewers and listeners' comments as well. But for me, stewards called that one right in terms of a ranking of severity.
Well, I disagree. And that, of course, means that Jimmy's wrong and he's an idiot. So, but anyway, guys, that will do for episode 17 of Downforce TV. Now, don't forget, next week, we've got the one that we keep talking about so far this season. It's the Spanish Grand Prix. It is the introduction of the harsher wing deflection test. The flexi front wings are finally outlawed from next week. There's some talk that maybe it's going to hold McLaren back a little bit, Mercedes back a little bit. Ferrari are looking forward to it. McLaren are adamant that it's not going to do anything. We will see, but let's not forget that Ferrari a few years ago were adamant that the engine clarification didn't negatively affect their car, even though it clearly did. So we'll see. Is McLaren bluffing? Is it really going to affect them? We'll find out next week. And of course, it is launch week as well for F1 25, a game very dear to mine, GB's heart. So we'll be playing lots of that this week. So do check us out on our various channels if you want to see some of that, and we will discuss it next week as well, along with the Spanish Grand Prix, along with Flexi Wings. It's going to be a good one next week, and we'll catch you then.